All right, time for evening story time. Got my work done, got the animals fed, bills paid, so got some time to sit on my patio, build a nice little fire, and commence that age-old tradition of sitting around a campfire and telling stories. So, hi, I'm John. I'll be your storyteller today. So if you haven't found my YouTube videos and you're just finding this isolated, I've been having paranormal experiences ever since I was 9 years old. I'm 56 now, so it's been a while. But I've had ghosts, I've had Reiki, I've had past life regression, I've had a near-death experience, I've had shared near-death experiences. Past life regressions, I think we're up to about 12 now. It's always good to go looking in those places, but at the same time, there's a reason why the windshield's bigger than a rear view mirror on a car. You're moving forward, not backwards. So I've got a presentation coming up at a Raleigh bookstore here in a couple weeks. So I'm just going to kind of test drive a presentation here and see how it goes. So I think what I'd like to do is like to talk to you about what I would call the anatomy of a near-death experience. And I come at this for, if you met me in my day job, you'd be like, what the hell, dude? Why are you telling us this? I've been in pharmaceutical research since 96, and I've worked my way up from the streets to the spreadsheets, as the case may be. Also been an oncology nurse, worked in business development within pharma. When I wasn't being a clinical data manager and a programmer, I started teaching myself AI. And so now I'm consulting pharmaceutical companies and showing them how AI can improve their process and their development cycles. I've also got a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak. I've written 2 books. I've created a skin cream, an organic skin cream designed for cancer survivors. And I also do some consulting work here and there, but pretty much keeps me in coffee and bourbon. So it's nice, but it's not everything. But the other side of this is peculiar. So as I mentioned, I started seeing ghosts at 9. Started doing astral projection at 14. Was doing psychic self-defense at 21. You work in a couple haunted houses, it just has to happen. I started doing Reiki and also had spontaneous past life regressions at 30. Had my near-death experience at 40. Shared near-death experience, I had 2 of those at 44. My near-death experience, I thought I knew everything that happened to me when, that went down at my 40th. But then at 48 years old, I got a download of even more information. It was like, I thought I had the whole Encyclopedia Britannica, and instead I found out that I was 2 or 3 volumes short. It's almost like watching a movie and you see the director's cut. That's like, I've seen this movie before. And then you all of a sudden you realize that you haven't seen all of the movie. So had an experience like that. I started doing remote viewing at 50. And there's a difference between astral projection, which I said I was doing at 14. Remote viewing, it's an out-of-body experience, part of a larger umbrella, so to speak. And then I had my 3rd download at 52. So the thing I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about, I guess, the near-death experience, but also how it fits into the whole ecosphere of what is an out-of-body experience and how does an NDE fit into an out-of-body experience and what isn't an NDE. Talk a little bit about shared NDEs as well as near-death experiences. We'll talk about the traditional paradigm. I mean, every near-death experience is unique to that individual, but there are certain things that are really common. We'll talk about something called what I call re-entry turbulence. When you come back, about half the people know what they're doing and the other half are still trying to figure out what they're doing. And I'm in that camp. So we'll do a summary of everything, and then I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experience. But I want to make sure that I leave time for folks to ask questions, and this may be an opportunity for someone who's been sitting on information to finally share it. And I'll go into a little more detail about that. I come at this with a little bit of background. I worked with ions for a couple years. I worked with assist for a couple years. I became certified as a certified peer counselor with assist. I also did some research for ions. I took about 250 some odd case studies and basically created a database of those experiences so that Dr. Bruce Grayson could present it at a, oh goodness, no, that's not an earthquake, that's me smacking the cord on my, smacking my cord here. So anyway, we'll just roll through what I think I'll be talking about for this presentation. So we start at the very top of all this. We have what we call an out-of-body experience, and anytime your consciousness is separate from your body, and this happens in a lot of stories and in a lot of descriptors. Some people will call it a near-death experience, a spiritually transformative experience, a satori, lucid dreaming, astral projection. So there's a lot of things that it could be. And so trying to figure out what pigeonhole to put something like that into can be a challenge. But again, a near-death experience, I think, is probably the largest circle of this Venn diagram. But again, there's abduction, there's astral projection, there's remote viewing, there's bilocation. There's actually a couple incidents of bilocation actually in the Old Testament, which is pretty cool. This kind of gets into a shade of gray. I mean, if you do fasting and you don't go too far down that rabbit hole, it's not really a near-death experience. But if you've been fasting willingly or unwillingly for too long, your body does start to shut down, and it can lead to a near-death experience. Same thing too with pharmacodynamics, and that's just a really big word for taking drugs and see what happens, kids. So a lot in the news, I guess, about ketamine and fentanyl. Then you've got the old standbys of LSD and psilocybin, ayahuasca. Gotta make sure we get that in there. Peyote. I'm sure there's others out there, but I'm not going to list them off exhaustively, but you get the idea. Again, same type of thing. If it's done in moderation and done with respect, then you understand that you can get out of your own way, have your consciousness separate from your body, but at the same time, you're not at risk of that body, ceasing that body's continued existence. The other thing too, I think is kind of cool, is that Dr. Ray Moody wrote a book in 1976 called Life After Life, where he talks about these near-death experiences, and he's the one that actually coined the term near-death experience. So fascinating guy. I don't know if he's touring around anymore, but I've met him a couple of times, and the MD and PhD in philosophy makes for a very interesting character. I've met him at the Rhine a couple of times in a couple of book signings, and if you get a chance to read Life After Life, it's really a seminal book for Western society with respect to what is a near-death experience and how he went about quantifying that. Now, there's been some discussion and debate, and I haven't moved in these circles since 2011 through 2015, 2016. So it may have changed since then, so my apologies if I'm not up on that. But in order for it to be a near-death experience, death has to be on the table. So there has to be a potential risk for the ending of your life. And however that looks, whether that's chronic or acute, it doesn't matter. It just there has to be a risk there. Now, if there isn't a risk, but you still go through the same kind of cognitive paradigm, then that's where we kind of bring in an STE, or spiritually transformative experience. And I'll dig into this a little more. But things like a satori, an ecstatic moment of ecstasy, a lot of, again, we're back to the Old Testament stuff here. Prayer, orgasm, always a fun one to talk about. Meditation. These are all ways of other disciplines, other belief systems, other cognitive structures that peel back the small u, small letter y, you, which is your body, your corporeal self, your meat suit, whatever you want to call it, and the capital Y, you, which is your consciousness. And some people will say it's your soul. I don't like to use that word just because there's a connotation there that implies a Judeo-Christian belief system. And I don't want to exclude people. So if I say meat suit, I mean your body. And if I say your consciousness, then, if you want to think soul, that's fine. The other thing too that's important is that I've been to enough of these conferences and worked with enough people in counseling and such that you need to make sure that you rule out the possibility of a psychological diagnosis. There's so much going on in the world today, and especially with COVID and politics and blah, 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 blah. It is very easy to get distracted, distressed, and depressed. And so you want to make sure that what you are seeing when you talk to folks, that a psychological issue isn't in that mix. The other thing too that I want to, again, I'm sorry, my data's a little older, but I believe it was 2014 or 2015, the Pew Research Center went and asked a bunch of Americans and whether or not they have had a near-death experience. And according to Pew Research, 10 million Americans per year have a near-death experience. Now, I don't know how they quantified a near-death experience. I don't know how deep that went. This was just a blurb in a newsletter that I caught. I went back and looked at Pew Research to see that it was there, but I didn't dig deep on that. So if you want your homework, there's some homework for you. Part of the other thing I learned in my research was that, again, roughly 50% of the people who have a near-death experience, man, they've got their head and their butt wired together, as my dad used to say. It was a little more colorful. But they got a mission and they're on it. And the other 50%, which I was a part of that tribe, they don't know whether to scratch their watch or wind their ass. They're confused, they're not supported. This turbulence, I call it reentry turbulence, will last on average about 7 years. For me, it was 9. One of my case study subjects was 20 years post, and he was still wrestling with it. So it can be very challenging to have all your support systems ripped out from under you. I think the most important thing that you could do if someone were to come to you and present this is just listen. Don't deny their experience, because they're already questioning reality. Don't, it's sacred too. For so many people, it's sacred. I mean, for some folks in their minds, they literally had conversations with God without Neil Donald Walsh, and they still hold that precious. And so to discount that really can be harmful. And so, again, like a therapist would, don't course correct them, just listen to them. Take mental notes or physical notes or whatever, maybe come back to it a little while later, but eventually people themselves will come to the realization that, I need to stop living in my own reality and start living in what I call cooperative reality. You get up, you need coffee, traffic is a, pain in the ass. I don't like work. My significant other, snores, farts, or spends too much. These are things that are in cooperative reality that we can all kind of, circle around and agree upon and have a frame of reference. Comedians are really good at this. But then there's subjective reality, and you've heard the term, I'm sure, that reality is based upon the lenses of your experience. And so I've had near-death experience, other people have not. I've jump-started people with CPR who were dead, and maybe other people have not. I sang for a president of the United States, and other people have not. So my lenses are going to be different than other people's lenses. But in some cases, they are so dramatic and so different that you really have to question whether or not you're suitable to be back in cooperative reality. So if people tell their story, just listen. So again, I mentioned before that the traditional near-death experience is, unique to each person, but there are broad topics that kind of fit in. So you're going to have, in a near-death experience, you're going to have some sort of an injury or an illness, and it's either going to be acute, like in that moment something happened, like in a car accident, or it's going to be chronic, maybe organ failure. But again, we're back to that point of, is your physical continuation being threatened? That is a criteria for a, quote, near-death experience. It's something that transcends race, it transcends nationality, theology, education, any isms that you may be packing around. It doesn't care, any of them. I saw all of them represented. Another thing that's common is the sensation of flying or movement. I've heard it described as, imagine kind of an opaque tunnel, like maybe clouds painted on the sides of this tunnel, so that no matter where you look, it's kind of wispy, gauzy, whitey type thing. But you don't know whether you're flying through the tunnel and have no sense of air resistance or wind or breeze, or you're stock still and the tunnel is being moved. And that's why you have the sensation of movement, but with no wind, because it is the surrounding that is moving and not you. And I've chewed on this quite a bit because I started thinking about quantum mechanics and string theory and Einstein's spooky action at a distance. And if you were an electron and you were entangled with another electron on the other side of the universe, would you perceive that connection as being a motionless tunnel? Anyway, that's a mental chew toy for another time. The other thing you'll see in there is you're coming through this tunnel after you've been flying for a while, then all of a sudden you're welcomed. And they're going to be your ancestors, your grandparents, anybody who has predeceded you that you had an emotional connection with. I personally was surprised to see some of my patients. But they're all there. It's a big celebration. It's like the best birthday party you've ever had, multiplied by, infinity. It's gorgeous. While you're there, you're going to be in a place where very frequently it is described as whiter than white. It is so bright, it doesn't hurt your eyes. Well, you don't have any eyes over there. It doesn't hurt you to look around, but there's nothing there. It's just white. And you don't know if you're in, something the size of a one-car garage or a baseball stadium, because there's no frame of reference. But in this whiteness, there is a being. There is a, man, we're going to get caught up on nouns again. Again, Judeo-Christians are going to say God. Other folks, angels, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Jesus Christ, George Patton, who knows. But it is someone that you're going to perceive as being very intelligent. And there's also going to be an association of unconditional love. And again, your theology will kind of drive that. There may be some case studies out there, but I mean, my exposure to case studies is probably around 300, 320, somewhere in there. But of those folks, I never saw someone who had a theological representation to something that they did not grow up with. So I grew up in a household that was Catholic and Baptist. So I'm lucky that, I didn't see, Satan and brimstone and guilt, and a Catholic nun with a ruler with a metal tip. It's just, we'll get to that. So once you have that connection with that superior being, superior in either intelligence, experience, or love, you want to call it God, fine, call it God. Source, George Carlin called it the big electron. Whatever makes you comfortable, choose your noun and we'll move on. From there you get the tour. Like if your source or guide was a stage manager, you get to come up on the stage, you get to look behind the stage, you get to see, how do they move the scrims, how do they move the curtains, and where do you hit your spots, and what are your lighting cues, and all that sort of stuff. So you get to see kind of behind the scenes type of thing. Then you get a download. And again, this is very unique, very specific to the individual, because we each have a plan. Sometimes you literally have to have a come to Jesus moment, or, source, Buddha, Kuan Yin, whatever, to course correct, because you're allowed to have a free will here. But again, this is another one of my mental chew toys. If you have free will, then why can't I just screw up royally? Why can't I? But it seems like there are entities of different realms, of different energy levels that will come in and course correct you. And I find that interesting. It's like, if it is a place of free will, then why can't I just have a royal screw up the entire time? Because, reincarnation. Your body's kind of like a car in a race. The car breaks down in the race isn't over. You hop in your backup car and you keep in the race. So, the driver is your consciousness. The car is your body, it's your meat suit. It will get banged up, it will get in an accident, and you will have to get out of it eventually. You just get into another one and the race goes on. So once you have that download, then there's the return. And sometimes the return is very unceremonious. You're just, right back, which can be traumatic, because if you've been in a car wreck and all you've had a near-death experience, you're not feeling that pain. You're in the midst of a family reunion of people you haven't seen in a while, and you're having the best party of your life. So plenty of oxytocin and all the feel-good neurochemicals. But when you have the return, then you're back in your meat suit, and then all the injury and damage and such are right there waiting on you. So it's traumatic. I can understand why so many people don't want to come back. And that's interesting too, that there's been some things I've read, both case studies and in books, where people have a near-death experience and there's like a negotiation. And I had a minor negotiation. Like, I don't want to go back. It's almost like being on the playground. It's like, I don't want to go back out there. People are mean. They won't let me play. Or they're not playing by the rules. Or whatever. Earth is a playground. And you can decide which ride you want to get on and not get on. You want to get PO'd about who's the president, or PO'd about some sort of ism that's going on in the world? Hop on that bus, go for the ride, enjoy it. But it's not permanent. And you can just as easily get off that ride and move on to something better or different. So let's talk about reentry turbulence, and pardon me as I nothing like a cold after work beer, just saying. So let's get back to reentry turbulence. Now, this is a term that I coined, but it comes from a friend of mine who works for NASA, and one of her responsibilities was tracking all of the space debris that's out there. And you're trying to launch into outer space, but you've got 40 years of space garbage floating around, moving at 20, 30,000 miles an hour. You don't want to hit any of that. And sometimes that stuff comes in hot and heavy and burns up, most times. But in my mind, that was also what happens to us, is that when we go up or into that place where we have our download and kind of a reaffirmation of mission, when you come back, it's turbulent, especially for that 50%. That 50%, why it's turbulent, they are going to lose some, if not all, of their primary supports as a human being. They may lose their spouse, relationship with their family, their job, their friends, their religion, their everything. I mean, it's a Control-Alt-Delete on your life. And some folks only have a couple of those things change. I did it again. Smacking my cord here. Other folks, it is the full meal deal. Everything gets wiped and you have to completely start over again. And I think that's why myself and other people, it takes you the longer than that 7-year average. The other thing too is you come back with, you have a decreased sense of materialism. And now I think about it, there's kind of an inverse correlation between materialism and altruism. You kind of give up being on that merry-go-round, and what you do have, you want to share with others, and you have this compulsion. I want to say compulsion, or do I want to say obsession? We'll stick with compulsion, to make the world a better place, and however you think you can. You also see through fake stuff. And I think that goes with the materialism, especially commercials on TV, or seeing interviews with pundits and such, or just at the grocery store. I mean, anytime you interact with people, it's like you all of a sudden they have this sharpened radar now, and you can hear, feel, smell the BS, and you don't want to be a part of it. You just opt out. But again, that's part of collective reality. So, choose wisely. But any of the, isms also, anything that is exclusionary, for me especially, it was religion. The name Catholic really means everybody. But you talk to any Catholic, you'll say, well, we're not so sure about these people. And I don't resonate with that. Even if I was a nurse, I had to treat people regardless of their belief system. I had you for 12 hours on my shift. I took care of you for those 12 hours to the best of my ability. I didn't care about any of those stuff. And so that, I think that really helped me with my assimilation into the download. A lot of people come back proselytizing. And I know that's kind of a loaded word with religion, but I don't know another word to use, but people come back and it's almost like it's formulaic. Have a near-death experience, come back, you talk about it ad nauseum, you write a book or two about it, you do talks about it on whatever media you can get a place to do the talk about it. And the irony about it all is that there is an ineffability about the whole process. You don't have the words to describe it. And I think this is where having a peer counselor, having someone who's been through the experience helps. Just like any other situations where people have PTSD, soldiers, for example, they will be more forthcoming with other soldiers who have been through similar circumstances, even if it was decades apart. Today's PTSD was yesterday's shell shock, but there is a shared experience, so you don't have to try to find the words. You can just look at a person and say, the other person nods, yes, I know. And then you can get past that aspect of it, and then, get past the pleasantries and get to the nitty-gritty. The other thing about reentry turbulence folks is that they are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than the average public. And the thing about that is most, if not all, most, not all. Most folks will refer to it as, I just want to go home. They're homesick. They now no longer have a fear of death. They know what's waiting for them. They realize how beautiful and wonderful it is and how hard it is to be here on Earth. I mean, this place is the wild, wild west. So it is something to also be aware of when you talk to those folks. Again, listen to them. Don't deny their experience. Let them have their say. You may be the first person they've told it to. So let them have their say. Let them have their moment. And don't deny them that, because that just adds on to the pile of bricks they're carrying around that may lead to suicide. And we've already covered this before. The average, turnaround time is 7 years. Now, I want to make sure I talk about some resources here, because if there's anyone here, if there's anyone in the room that I would be speaking to that has this experience and has not been able to find someone, I want to make sure I get some resources at you. So there is IANDS, IANDS.org, and that stands for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. They are an excellent resource if you're trying to wrap your left brain around this. So a lot of evidence-based, peer-reviewed data is there for the pickings. So it's very helpful. I found it very helpful because, again, I'm very left-brained by nature, but I had some crazy shit happen to me that I could not rationalize or explain, or I did not have a box for this stuff. And I like to have all my information in boxes and put on shelves, and when I want that information, I pull that box. And I didn't have a box for this. And then I learned to just make a big toy box and throw everything in, but that's another story. The next thing I want to talk to you about is a group called ACISTE, ACISTE, which stands for American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. It's a friggin' mouthful. I'm sorry. I didn't pick it. It just is what it is. I'm sure ACISTE was maybe picked for, what it sounds like, but it's ACISTE. Both of them are .org. But where one is more evidence-based, This one is more experiential based. It has a lot of recovery information. So one is to kind of prove or disprove that you're not crazy, and the other one is, how do I heal from this? How do I rejoin cooperative reality? And that's where I found Assist very helpful. If you can't lay hands on those two resources for whatever reason, you can go and look and see if there's a psychologist or psychiatrist or a mental health professional near you who will list the things that they do or that they specialize in. And what you want to look for is transpersonal psychology. Now, that's a relatively new body of study, which is ironic because indigenous people and shaman have been doing this for thousands of years, in the sense of the rite of passage for many people, especially men, from boys to men, or from, get that song out of your head, or from, someone who is a shaman apprentice. You have to challenge your continued existence so that you can have that spiritual epiphany that gives you access to that knowledge. If those three places don't work, and if you go to IONS or Assist, they will have places where you can look up people who are certified to help, and they sort it by state, and I think by zip code. I know state. But if you can't find somebody there, and you can't find somebody with transpersonal psychology, I would at least look for someone who has experience with complex PTSD. Now, PTSD can be an episode, a singular episode, but it is so traumatic that it doesn't allow you to process, whereas complex PTSD is the same type of event, but it's over and over and repeated. And again, if you have lost your support systems across the board, you're going to have challenges. And complex PTSD, folks, at least is a foundation to get you started. So this is where I would probably pause and let everybody, kind of catch some air and give people some time to ask questions and kind of reprioritize. In my mind, I visualize a closet system. I'm sure you've seen these like California closets or something where it's like the shirts go here and the pants go here, and then you can hang these here, and there's all these like little niches and cubby holes. I'm 6'5". Those things never work for me. I had an apartment with one of those. It's like I hang my shirt on the floor and my shirt just kind of pools at the bottom, which my cat absolutely loved to make a nest in, and then I would have, this cat hairy butt tail hanging off my shirt. It was not a good look. I'm just telling you right now. So, but in these cubby holes of your experiences, you may have something that you can at least hang something on. And so if I tell you, I saw a ghost, well, maybe you've read about ghosts or you've seen it on TV, but you haven't had direct experience. But at least you have a coat hanger to hang that on, to have something that you can talk to that person about, some sort of frame of reference. What I'm about to tell you, there is no cubby hole, there is no coat hanger. When I tell people this stuff, people generally look like a Pez dispenser. So, yeah, man, I got to find a new way to do this. I keep yanking my cord here, and that's not a euphemism. There really is a cord here. Okay, here we go, kids. So what was unique to me is that when I went through the tunnel, went to the whiter than white, found this connection, I said, "What are you?" And it said, "I am everything." And my response is, "Well, that has to be cool." Being a smart ass in front of God. It's like, well, you made me, dude, so that's your fault. But in this space, all of a sudden I saw this like silver tendril start to appear out of nothingness. And it slowly kind of spiraled and worked its way right to my forehead. And once there was this connection, it was just like this whoosh of data. I was like, whoa, okay. And then I caught up to it and was looking and was like, in my mind I heard, "He's ready." And again, another whoosh of data. And it was like, if you had to give it an equivalency, it was like turning on a flashlight the first time. The second time was like turning on one of those spotlights they have like at parking lots for, a grand opening or a fair or something like that. The next one I got was almost just like a bomb going off or a magnesium fire. Once I had like all this data rate upgrades to the point where whatever, I was less than human and more than human, less than a human body, but more than human in ability to comprehend and process. That's when I saw my Sherpa, and it was the comedian George Carlin. Yeah. And the funny thing was that George Carlin was still alive at the time. My near-death experience was 2005 and George died in 2009. So again, I think back to this movie, Contact, where Ellie saw her father when she was talking to space aliens, but her first contact wasn't her father. They just went into the memory, found something that would create the least amount of cognitive dissonance so that the message would get carried through. So I got George Carlin. So instead of getting the "Behold and welcome to heaven where I will show thee the wondrous things that go on," it was more like, "Dude, there's some crazy shit here and I can't wait to show you this stuff. Come on, man, let's go look." So I had that as my experience. And while I was given the tour, one of the things was kind of being presented to the crowd. "Hey, look who's here," or "Look who's back." And it was a Quidditch pitch from the Harry Potter movies. And again, if you're not into Harry Potter, imagine a soccer stadium, but also a football stadium, in the sense that it was completely enclosed and the seats kind of just rose up, all the way into the clouds. And in the crowd, I could make out every nationality, and it was like central casting gave out all the costumes. So people in Roman soldier garb, people dressed like, Jesus or Godspell. There were people in modern day clothes, 40s clothes, Star Trek uniforms. It was everything, everybody. There was an introduction, an explanation on why I was here, an explanation on why Earth is one of the hardest places to incarnate, and why you basically need to be a spiritual badass even to be here, even if you chose to forget your karmic inheritance that you've earned up to this point. Like Chutes and Ladders, you could be at the top of your game and almost ready to win, but part of the challenge to be here is to suspend that knowledge so you can go in cold. And buddy. I found out later that I had a talk with Archangel Michael, that I had become music and was just about to get away, specifically losing my human self completely and just folding into the rapturous music that I was listening, then singing, and then becoming. And then during my download, my second download in 2012, because again, I had the experience in '05. When I had a download in 12, I had Archangel Michael and another guy who he introduced me to as Archangel Jophiel. But they literally came to my apartment door, rang the doorbell at about 3 o'clock in the morning, came in, sat down on my couch, and we all drank beers and talked about stuff I should stop doing and stuff I should start doing. Clearing out haunted places where there were non-corporeal entities that have never been human. Not a good way to spend my time. So, and then the most recent download I got 4 years ago now, was Archangel Michael introducing me to Saint Germain and saying he's going to be giving you some information now, which sucked. There's just no two ways about it. Anything you can imagine that might be a trauma that we would have to endure as human beings with respect to Earth and Earth changes, I got shown that crap, and it wasn't fun. But at least it's kind of like an awareness, I guess. But yeah, so that's just a handful of the stuff that happened. Again, I'm trying to be sensitive at the time, and I know I'm only talking for an hour, and I think I've been at it for about 45 minutes now. So I'll do a slide where I talk about my website, johnmathis.me, because it is all about me. It's where you can find some classes that I teach, books that I've written, a little bit more about my background. I left out some things like, reading tarot and cleaning houses, ghost hunting at the Tower of London, just fun stuff like that. So if you want to reach out to me, you can contact me through the website. There's also a bunch of links there. So the ADD really has its hold on me sometimes. And so I've got some stuff. I have a LinkedIn profile where it's just my psychic stuff turning on. And instead of listing jobs where I've worked, I list the psychic thing that turned on, what year it happened. And if you don't know what it is, I threw a couple bullet points to explain it. I've been writing on medium.com. I've been putting articles out there for a couple years. I have what I call my consciousness journal that's posted out there. And then I have these things here. I'll do YouTube discussions. And again, if the mood strikes me that I feel like I should be putting a video out as opposed to using the spoken word, which I'm much more comfortable with. But sometimes it's good to stretch past the comfort zone so you can learn more. And this is where I'd probably close and say, anybody got any questions? And it looks like I'm 48 minutes in. So I'll have to pick up the cadence a little bit. I'm pretty sure I did a lot of my ums that I usually do. Trying to be cognizant of that. That's one of the things I do for the video too. But yeah, so I hope you appreciate this. If I put this out on YouTube, then please feel free to jump into the comments and make a comment, ask a question. If you want to hear any other topics, let me know. I'm willing to share what I know and what I've learned, help increase the cadence of knowledge, because I don't want to get all doomy and gloomy here, but I've got to stop yanking my cord. I think I had nuns tell me that when I was in grade school. But it's better to be over-prepared and be disappointed than to be on the opposite side of that equation. And I'd much rather have people on the front end of that equation be over-prepared, and that'll probably be the best way. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you had a good time, and hope you learned something, and please feel free to reach out. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.